come a little closer. This car is not for everyone. If you want what everyone else has, there's a lot of 911s for sale. This Porsche is for the people that know. I've owned every single variations of the Porsche 928. After this video, there'll be less of a mystery to you. The Porsche 928 can easily be divided into two segments, early style and the later style. The early Porsche 928s are having a renaissance now. They're being featured in movies and print advertisings all over the world. And so the prices of the earlier ones are starting to explode, especially the nice ones. But this wasn't always the case. For most of the Porsche 928's history, the later S4s were always at a premium versus the earlier models. This picture, which is 27 years old now, is my first Porsche 928. You see, I didn't have 928 S4 money back then. I had sold my first car to barely purchase a 1982 928S. So what did I do? I made a pretend 928 S4. So between me and my brother, we stripped that brown 928, added the 928 S4 bumpers, GTS wheels, and voila, that's what you see here. It wasn't actually perfect, by the way. It had just a couple rigs. The brake lights never actually worked. And you see that steering wheel? Well, that's actually a Fox body Mustang airbag steering wheel with the emblem of a keychain. I know. So jump 27 years from this picture and what has changed? Absolutely nothing. The Porsche 928 is still the ultimate Porsche for me. Now, I did discover a couple things along the way that did make me look at things a little bit different. Whoa, but first, I need a favor. Like and subscribe to this channel. It really does help out with the algorithm so that this video gets pushed out to more people and more people can know about the Porsche 928. Now, let's go. One of the things that I discovered, obviously, is that from this pretend S4 to a real S4, that was just another level. Speed is what the Porsche 928 S4 has. You really have to take it to the highway. And the way that it gathers speed is completely different than most cars because the gears are so long that that car almost starts getting a second wind at about 80 miles an hour. As a matter of fact, back in 1994, a lot of salesmen were interviewed about the Porsche 928. The consensus was back then that if they had a racetrack in the back of the Porsche dealership, they would have sold more Porsche 928s because on 911 on a test drive it felt fast at 30, 40, 50 miles per hour. So back then it was very difficult to actually truly test drive a Porsche 928. The competence was perhaps a little bit too much. Now, what to look for on these Porsche 928s, specifically because they're all used at this point. So the way that I see this is that you're not really buying the car. I mean, yes, you are buying the car, but what you're really buying is the previous owners of the car. And many of them have had a lot. You also have to remember that for a lot of years, the Porsche 928 was not worth what it's worth today. A lot of the maintenance that was still high relative to the actual price of the car was not done. So a lot of people got into the Porsche 928 because it was a cool looking Porsche, me at 17, but the maintenance was not done. The maintenance was deferred year after year and owner after owner. The Porsche 928 is the car that you purchase right at the very beginning. If you shop price with a Porsche 928, you're fishing for a lot of trouble. Any Porsche 928 under $40,000 is going to need work. Period. The dashboard, the engine, the suspension is gonna need something. Driving a Porsche 928, it should feel like an expensive bank vault rolling down the road. Now, most Porsche 928s on the road now actually don't feel that way. Most of them have squeaks and groans as they're going over bumps. How can it be both? Either it's a tight structure or it's not. Well, this is actually really simple. And I've seen this on most Porsche 928s for the past 27 years. The rear hatch, when it comes down, the locking mechanism falls down on a nylon receiver. Most Porsche 928s do not even have this nylon receiver anymore. So the rear hatch jiggles as it's going through bumps. Another thing that happens is that the actual rear hatch lock that goes down can actually crack. So the hatch is not really ever solidly closed. And so a lot of people, what they do is that they switch all these pieces thinking that this is going to give them the bank vault feel that a Porsche 928 should have, but they don't. There's one thing missing: the Teflon tapes that go next to the rubber snubbers on the rear hatch. These rubber snubbers stop the hatch from jiggling back and forth. If you don't have these Teflon tapes back there, you're gonna go crazy looking for squeaks and groans all over the entire car. Most Porsche 928s that I've seen have one or both missing. You swap out these pieces and magically the Porsche 928 feels like a bank vault rolling down the road. It's that simple. I know it doesn't make any sense and those little things really shouldn't make that much of a difference, but they do. when the Porsche 928 S4 came out, it had one of the largest wings in production. You see this wing here, they all typically look the same. However, they are not. The 1987 model specifically had a very unique wing, and this unique wing had a flip-up mechanism for supposedly better cleaning around the hatch. Now what happens is that in 1988, just 1 year later, Porsche removed that. It just put 2 bolts at each side fused into the rubber, and that's the way that the wings work going forward. But what happens? A lot of people, what they do is that they open up with the wing and they slam the hatch shut with the wing over and over again, year after year. So most of these wings that I've seen are actually kind of loose. They're jiggling a little bit back and forth. That wouldn't normally be a big issue, except that when you're going on the highway, the amount of downforce pushed on these wings is significant. So what a lot of people do is that they look for the earlier 1987 only flip-up wings, but not because of the flip-up mechanism. Nobody cares about the flip-up mechanism. What you're looking for is the structure of that flip-up mechanism. It is completely different. It is overbuilt, and it is a huge upgrade for any newer 928 S4 and GTS, as a matter of fact, that doesn't have that same mechanism. So when looking at a Porsche 928, always check the rear wing to see how loose it is, and if the bolts have been bonded together with JB Weld. That means that that's a temporary fix and it's gonna go sooner or later. One thing that I've noticed about Porsche 928s is that every single one that I've ever owned has had busted motor mounts. Now, it's really hard to diagnose what bad motor mounts look like because the car's got a really powerful motor and you think that a level of vibration should be coming into the cabin because it's a big V8. But the Porsche 928 has one of the smoothest motors that Porsche has actually ever designed. You put brand new motor mounts on any Porsche 928 and the car feels completely different. As a matter of fact, a lot of the vibrations that you think are the road when you're driving are actually coming from the motor, and that's one of the revelations that you have, that you change the motor mounts and suddenly the suspension somehow gets smoother. But there's something else that should be changed besides the motor mounts, and that is never changed on Porsche 928s, and it is the transmission mount. When you change the transmission mounts and the motor mounts, the engine feels hydraulic in its nature, and it could go from a car feeling old and kind of tired to a Porsche 928 that feels brand new with a power band that is ultra smooth. Aftermarket radios. Now, a radio seems like such an innocent thing on a Porsche 928, but you can get in a lot of trouble with Porsche 928s and the radios that have been installed over the years by previous owners. From my experience, either you've got the radio, the phone, or the EQ, and countless other that has been added to these cars over the years. Usually when you see an aftermarket radio, it's not the first install. The car has actually gone through multiple aftermarket radios. This is not good. So you have to definitely watch out for any upgrades that have been done by the previous owner, and not because of the radio, because of what's left by the installers in the back. The wiring is never the same. I had a Porsche 928 that the radio was getting power from the rear wiper switch. I've seen those cases a lot. So if a Porsche 928 has phantom electronic issues, in 90% of the cases, it points back to creative installs throughout the car's history. It's not the car's fault. Ever since before I could ever drive, I was reading about the Porsche 928, and one of the things that would always stand out was the big warning on a Porsche 928. And what's this huge warning that they always give? The big scary timing belt. Now I can see where it came from. At the time, the Porsche 928 had the longest timing belt in production, but over 27 years of owning Porsche 928s, I've never seen a Porsche 928 timing belt go. Yes, you need to change it and change the rollers and all the guides that are associated with the belt, but the bigger issue that I've seen is air leaks in the engine. You see, the Porsche 928's 32 valve motor is very specific in that when you refresh that motor, you need to go ahead and remove the intake and refresh everything underneath. Now, most of them that I've seen are full of little air leaks that make them miss a little bit here, a little bit there, and what happens is you have a car that's not running properly. To refresh a Porsche 928's intake is a maintenance item. It's not an aesthetic item, even though it looks pretty when you go ahead and refinish it. These intakes and all the rubber that's underneath needs to get refreshed when its time is up. So air leaks are a far bigger issue on a Porsche 928 than a timing belt going ever would. So when you see a Porsche 928 that has had the entire engine refreshed, it says so much more than when the last timing belt was done. Original paint versus a new shiny paint job. There's two types of Porsche 928s in the market, the restored ones and the original ones. Let's suppose that you have the most beautiful, spectacular Porsche 928 you've ever seen with a brand new paint job versus a slightly faded but original paint job. What will be more desirable? It's very simple. I will pay a premium for the original paint job even though it's slightly faded. Paint jobs can hide multiple paint jobs, color changes, crashes. I mean, the list goes on and on. Either it's original or it's not. And here's my thinking, and it should be your thinking also. By the time a Porsche 928 has needed a paint job, by its very definition means that it was neglected year after year, year after year, that it got so bad that it required a paint job. And after it's been repainted, it's impossible to know how many times that's happened throughout its entire life, versus a car that has its original paint job. Think about how well a car with its original paint has been treated by each owner. A lot of years have passed since these cars rolled off the showroom. And so if a car has its original paint job, that means that every single owner has babied the car. Original will always be 100 times better. I can't believe that there would actually be a debate on this, but let me know what you guys think in the comments below. When looking to buy a Porsche 928, before you even drive to go see the car, before you even ask for the Carfax, before anything, look at one thing and at one thing only, and it is the interiors. The Porsche 928's interiors are very difficult to restore properly. A Porsche 928 interior is far more expensive to restore than any Porsche interior that I've ever seen. And there's very specific reasons for this. The way that the seat designed is, if you don't do it properly, it looks like a puffy mess. The dashboards, because of the compound curves that it has, they're done in such a way that when you go ahead and redo the dashboard, it bubbles up at the edges. So when looking for a Porsche 928, try to find the one with the nicest interior possible. Now also I understand that if you actually have a Porsche 928 and the interior is busted, what can you do about it? Well, you can still source a brand new dashboard from Porsche. They're very difficult to get. You actually have to call different dealers throughout the United States, but they are still in stock, and it's a far better alternative than having your existing dashboard redone, because I've never seen a redone dashboard on a Porsche 928 that lasts more than 3 summers. So in this case, it's better to buy it original so you don't have to worry about it ever again. Buying from dealers. Now, when buying a Porsche 928, what you're really buying is actually the previous owner. If you're buying from a dealership, how can you even tell what the previous owner was thinking about the car? Realistically, very few dealerships know what they're selling. They're just flipping the cars. So if you ask a dealership how many miles are on that Porsche 928, they're going to tell you what's on the odometer, and that's it. They don't really know. And they'll truly believe that what's on the odometer are the actual miles. But that's not the way to go. Since the Porsche 928's motor can do over 400,000 or 500,000 miles. A lot of them have really high miles, but the odometers say something else. So it's very difficult to tell how many miles are on a Porsche 928. But there is one test that is 99.9% accurate from what I've seen in the past 27 years of owning Porsche 928s. And it is the driver's side bottom bolster. And I'm not talking about wear, because wear can be resprayed and patched up. As a matter of fact, that happens in most car used dealerships. They'll respray the driver's side bolsters to make it look brand new. But what no dealership that I see has ever done is check for the sag. Every single Porsche 928 with over 100,000 miles, the driver's side bottom bolster has a sag. Every single Porsche 928 that has under 100,000 true miles has 0 sag in that bolster. It is arrow straight. You want to see what a Porsche 928 with under 100,000 miles looks like? Looks like this. I have never seen a Porsche 928 with 20,000 miles with a seat like this. The biggest difference is the sag. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, how about if the owner was heavier and he put more pressure on that seat? Wouldn't that cause it to sag more? No. If it's got the sag, it's over 100,000 miles. If it doesn't have the sag, it's under 100,000 miles. Period. Is it worth purchasing a Porsche 928 GTS versus S4? And there's an obvious answer for this. Absolutely. Not only does the 928 GTS have the wider flares, it also has the 5.4 liter, and it has a lot of little tweaks that the earlier cars didn't, while essentially being the same car. Now, the biggest reason to go for the GTS is exclusivity. The Porsche 928 GTS is actually more rare than a Porsche 356 Speedster. It's that rare. And the prices obviously reflect this. When you're going to sell a Porsche 928 GTS, it's a worldwide market, it's not a local market. Even though it's expensive when you purchase it, you know that when you're going to sell that car, it's always going to command a premium. And as a matter of fact, as the years go by, the premium is only going to go higher, much higher. And one of the cool things about driving a Porsche 928 is that even 16 and 17-year-olds come up to the car wanting to know what it is, because they don't see it every single day. So it looks like an entire other generation is really getting interested in these cars. And what could be cooler than that? Now you know.